The bright studio lights shined down on the glossy stage as the cameras rolled. The audience sat in anticipation, waiting for the next moment of entertainment. The host, Jonathan Hayes, was known for his sharp wit and playful mockery. He thrived on teasing guests, making jokes at their expense, and entertaining the crowd with his over-the-top reactions. Sitting across from him on the plush guest chair was a woman in her late 20s. She was elegant, poised, and carried a quiet confidence that many in the room failed to notice. Her name was Olivia Carter. She wasn't a celebrity, nor was she a politician or a social media influencer. To the audience, she was just another guest, someone who had come on the show to share her story. But Jonathan's eyes weren't focused on her story. Instead, his gaze locked onto the necklace around her neck. It was an unusual piece, small, silver, with an intricate pendant that seemed to hold some deep meaning. To him, it was just another accessory, something easy to turn into a joke. He smirked and leaned forward. "Olivia, I have to ask," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "That necklace, it's quite the choice. Did you borrow it from your grandmother's attic?" The audience chuckled, and Jonathan grinned, sensing an opportunity to push further. Olivia didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head slightly and offered a small smile. "It's special to me," she said calmly. Jonathan waved a hand. "Oh, I'm sure it is," he continued, his tone playful but condescending. "But come on, it looks ancient. What's the story? Did a knight in shining armor give it to you?" More laughter from the crowd. Jonathan sat back, clearly pleased with himself. He was expecting Olivia to laugh along, to play into the joke. But she didn't. Instead, she remained silent, her fingers lightly brushing over the pendant. The room felt different now, like something was shifting. The laughter started to fade as people noticed her expression. It wasn't anger. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something else entirely. Jonathan's smirk wavered slightly. He wasn't used to this. Most guests either laughed at his jokes or got flustered. Olivia did neither. She just sat there, composed, her eyes holding a quiet strength. The co-host, Emily, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She could feel the mood in the room change. "Jonathan, maybe we should let Olivia tell us more about it," she suggested, trying to steer the conversation in a different direction. But Jonathan wasn't done. He thrived on audience reactions, and right now, he wanted to push Olivia just a little further. All right, he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I won't tease anymore. But really, Olivia, you have to admit, it looks like something from a history museum." A few weak chuckles from the audience, but the energy wasn't the same as before. Something was off, and people were beginning to sense it. Finally, Olivia leaned forward slightly. She looked Jonathan directly in the eyes. And then, in a voice so calm it sent chills down the room, she said, "This necklace belonged to someone very important. Someone who taught me everything I know. Someone who gave me the strength to be here today." The audience was silent now. Even Jonathan, for the first time that evening, seemed to hesitate. Before he could respond, Olivia continued. "You think it's funny," she said, her fingers tightening around the pendant. "You see an old piece of jewelry and assume it's something to laugh at. But what if I told you that this necklace carries a story so powerful, so life-changing, that mocking it would be the biggest mistake you've ever made?" Jonathan's face paled slightly. The audience held their breath. Something big was coming, and no one was laughing anymore. The air in the studio had changed. The playful laughter had died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. The audience, once entertained by Jonathan's teasing, now sat on the edge of their seats, waiting to see what would happen next. Jonathan cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Well, Olivia," he said, forcing a chuckle, "I didn't mean to offend you. It's just—" Olivia raised a hand, cutting him off. She wasn't angry, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that made him pause. She turned slightly towards the audience, her fingers still gripping the pendant around her neck. You asked me about this necklace, she said, her voice steady. You assumed it was something insignificant, something outdated. But what if I told you that this necklace carries the memory of a person who changed my life forever? A hushed murmur ran through the audience. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly feeling like he had miscalculated. This belonged to my mother, Olivia continued, her voice softer now. A woman who fought harder than anyone I've ever known. She wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. But she was strong. Stronger than you could ever imagine. Jonathan swallowed. He was beginning to regret his joke. She was a lawyer, Olivia said, her gaze never leaving his. Not just any lawyer. She took cases no one else would. She defended people who had nothing. People who were ignored, dismissed, ridiculed. She glanced down at the necklace. She wore this every single day in court. She used to say it reminded her why she fought so hard. A heavy silence settled over the room. Even the crew members behind the cameras had stopped moving, completely absorbed in Olivia's words. Jonathan forced another laugh, but it sounded hollow. That's quite a story, he said, trying to sound casual. I didn't mean any harm, really. Olivia tilted her head slightly. Didn't you? She asked. You saw something you didn't understand, and instead of asking, you mocked it. Isn't that the problem with the world today? Jonathan had no response. The audience wasn't looking at him anymore. All eyes were on Olivia. She sighed, shaking her head. My mother taught me to stand my ground, no matter what. To never let anyone belittle me. So when you made fun of this necklace, you weren't just mocking a piece of jewelry. You were mocking everything she stood for. Jonathan's face turned red. He had never been at a loss for words before, but right now, he had no idea what to say. Then Olivia did something unexpected. She smiled. Not out of anger, not out of triumph, but out of understanding. I know you didn't mean to be cruel, she said. But maybe next time, before you judge something, you'll take a moment to ask about it first. The audience erupted into applause. Jonathan's face tightened, but he forced a smile. You make a fair point, he admitted, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Olivia simply nodded. But the moment wasn't over yet. Because what Jonathan didn't know, what the audience was about to find out, was that Olivia wasn't just her mother's daughter. She was something much more. And soon, the world would see exactly who she was. The applause had died down, but the energy in the room was electric. Olivia had just silenced one of the most well-known TV hosts with nothing but the truth. But this was only the beginning. Jonathan shifted in his seat, still trying to regain control. He forced a chuckle, pretending to brush off the moment. Well, that was quite the speech, he said, flashing his signature smirk. But let's be real, Olivia. Your mother may have been an inspiring woman. But do you really think a simple necklace can hold that much power? Olivia's expression didn't change. She didn't react to the provocation. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the table between them. Jonathan, she said calmly, do you know who I am? Jonathan blinked, confused by the question. He glanced at his notes, flipping through the papers. Well, of course, he scoffed. You're Olivia Carter. You're here today because of your new book about. Olivia interrupted him with a small, knowing smile. That's what you think I'm here for. Jonathan hesitated. Well, yes. The audience murmured. Something was shifting. Olivia reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She placed it on the table, sliding it toward Jonathan. Why don't you read this? Jonathan hesitated before picking it up. His eyes scanned the document, and suddenly, his face lost all color. The smirk disappeared. The confidence drained. He looked up at Olivia, his voice suddenly dry. This is... Olivia nodded. That's right. Jonathan swallowed hard. He looked back at the paper, as if hoping the words would change, but they didn't. The audience sat in stunned silence, waiting for him to say it. Jonathan finally exhaled and cleared his throat. "This is a court document," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A legal case that you personally won." Olivia nodded again. "Not just any case. A case against one of the most powerful corporate firms in the country." A ripple of shock spread through the audience. Whispers broke out. Jonathan was visibly shaken now. "You mean to tell me?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You're a lawyer." Olivia smiled, but there was steel behind it. "Not just a lawyer," she said. "I'm one of the youngest attorneys to ever pass the bar exam. I graduated law school at 21. I've won cases that seasoned attorneys wouldn't dare touch." Jonathan couldn't believe it. He looked around, as if expecting someone to tell him this was a joke. "You didn't research me, did you?" Olivia asked, her voice gentle but firm. Jonathan clenched his jaw. He prided himself on knowing everything about his guests. But this was something he had completely missed. The audience watched in awe as the realization settled over him. "You thought I was just another guest," Olivia continued. "Someone to entertain, to mock. But Jonathan, I didn't come here today to promote a book." Jonathan stared at her, speechless. "I came here to teach you a lesson," she said. The silence in the room was deafening. And then, the audience erupted into cheers. Jonathan sank back in his chair, defeated. He had just been outplayed on his own show. But Olivia wasn't done yet. Because the biggest revelation of all was still to come. The studio was still echoing with the audience's reaction. Some clapped, others whispered in astonishment, and a few just stared, jaws slightly open. Olivia had just revealed herself as not only a sharp-witted guest, but a legal force to be reckoned with. Jonathan, the once confident TV host, was visibly shaken. His usual arrogance had vanished, replaced by something close to panic. But Olivia wasn't done yet. She let the energy in the room settle before speaking again. "You see, Jonathan," she continued, her voice smooth but firm, "you judged me before you knew anything about me. You assumed I was just here for entertainment. But the truth is," she leaned forward, locking eyes with him, "I was investigating you." A stunned silence swept over the studio. Jonathan blinked. "Investigating me," he repeated, his voice slightly hoarse. Olivia nodded, taking another folded document from her pocket and placing it on the table. "This," she said, tapping the paper, "is a legal complaint, a formal one. Filed against you weeks ago." Jonathan paled. His hand twitched toward the paper, but hesitated before picking it up. His eyes darted across the text, and as he read, his fingers tightened around the edges. The audience was completely still, holding their breath. "What? What is this?" Jonathan finally croaked. Olivia tilted her head slightly. "That, Jonathan, is evidence. Proof of multiple allegations of misconduct. You've used your platform to humiliate people, to spread misinformation, and to silence those who challenge you. But not anymore." Jonathan's face darkened. "This is absurd," he snapped, trying to regain control. "You can't just—" "Oh, I can," Olivia interrupted smoothly. "And I already have." She gestured toward the audience, the cameras, the live broadcast. "You thought you were in control of this interview," she said, her voice unwavering. "But I came prepared. This isn't just a legal battle anymore, Jonathan. The world is watching." Jonathan's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The studio lights suddenly felt hotter. The cameras zoomed in. Millions of viewers were at home, watching this unfold in real time. Then, as if on cue, a producer rushed onto the stage, whispering something frantically into Jonathan's earpiece. His expression shifted from anger to shock, then fear. Olivia simply waited. She already knew what was happening. Jonathan's hand trembled as he removed his earpiece. He let it drop onto the table, his face now ghostly pale. "What did they just tell you?" Olivia asked, tilting her head. Jonathan swallowed hard. He didn't respond. The producer hesitated before turning toward the audience and clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said hesitantly, we have to cut to a commercial break." But it was too late. The truth was out. The power had shifted. And for the first time in his career, Jonathan had lost control of his own show. The studio was no longer Jonathan's stage. It was Olivia's battlefield. The producer's voice trembled as he announced the sudden commercial break, but the audience wasn't fooled. They had just witnessed a power shift so intense that even the show's own staff couldn't contain it. Jonathan sat stiffly in his chair, his hands clenched into fists. His once confident smirk was gone, replaced by something far more vulnerable: fear. Olivia, on the other hand, remained calm. She adjusted the necklace he had mocked, letting the pendant catch the light. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she turned back toward him. "You see, Jonathan," she said smoothly, "when you humiliate people for entertainment, you assume they won't fight back. You assume they'll sit there and take it." Jonathan said nothing. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "But today," Olivia continued, "I fought back. And I didn't just fight for myself. I fought for every guest you've mocked, every person you've belittled, and every story you've twisted for your own gain." The audience erupted into applause. It was thunderous, rolling through the studio like a wave crashing against a shore. Some people stood cheering. Others chanted Olivia's name. Jonathan flinched at the sound. Then the producer rushed onto the stage again, this time with a piece of paper in hand. He leaned down and whispered something urgently into Jonathan's ear. Jonathan's face drained of color. His jaw tightened. His fingers gripped the edge of the desks so tightly his knuckles turned white. Olivia watched him, already knowing what had happened. The producer straightened and cleared his throat. His voice shook as he spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just received an important update." He glanced at Jonathan before continuing. "Effective immediately, Mr. Jonathan Reed has been suspended from his position as host of this show, pending further investigation." A collective gasp filled the room. Jonathan shot up from his seat. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "You can't do this to me. I built this show." Olivia stood too, calm, composed, completely in control. "No, Jonathan," she said. "You built your career on tearing others down. But today, you tore yourself down." The cameras zoomed in, capturing the exact moment Jonathan realized he had lost. Security stepped forward, ready to escort him out. He glared at Olivia one last time, his face red with rage, but there was nothing he could do. His reign was over. As he was led offstage, Olivia turned to face the audience. She smiled. Then, in the most poetic twist of fate, the producer cleared his throat again and spoke once more. "For now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest, and tonight's new host, Olivia Carter." The audience went wild. Jonathan's name was forgotten. His downfall was complete. And Olivia? She had just begun. The silence in the studio was deafening. Even with Jonathan Reed gone, the weight of what had just happened lingered in the air. Olivia took a slow breath, steadying herself as the cameras remained fixed on her. The producer, still looking stunned, stepped toward her. "Olivia," he said, his voice careful. "Are you sure you want to continue? This wasn't planned, and—" "I'm sure," Olivia interrupted, her tone steady. She glanced toward the audience, their faces filled with admiration and anticipation. They weren't just watching a show anymore. They were witnessing history. With a nod, the producer signaled to the crew. "All right, cameras rolling. Olivia Carter, take it away." A deep breath, a confident smile. And then, "Welcome back, everyone," Olivia said, her voice smooth and commanding. "Tonight, we've seen what happens when arrogance meets truth, when cruelty meets courage, and when the tables finally turn." The crowd roared with applause, and for the first time, Olivia felt the true power of her voice. But as the show went on, behind the scenes, chaos brewed. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit office across the city, Jonathan Reed was pacing like a caged animal. His hands trembled with rage as he dialed a number. The line clicked. A deep voice answered. "This better be important." Jonathan's jaw clenched. "They took everything from me, and I want it back." A pause, then a slow chuckle. "You want revenge, don't you?" Jonathan's eyes burned with fury. "I don't care what it takes. I want Olivia Carter destroyed." The voice on the other end of the line hummed in amusement. "Consider it done." Jonathan smirked, his confidence returning. This wasn't over. Not yet. The world had taken notice. Olivia Carter's moment of triumph had spread like wildfire. Clips of her standing tall against Jonathan Reed's arrogance were all over social media. News outlets praised her composure. Fans celebrated her strength. But in the shadows, danger lurked. Jonathan Reed was not a man who accepted defeat easily. Sitting in his luxurious penthouse, he swirled a glass of whiskey, his eyes fixed on the news playing on the giant TV screen. Every headline screamed the same thing: his humiliation, his downfall, Olivia Carter's rise. His fingers tightened around the glass until, crack, it shattered in his hand. Blood dripped from his palm, but he didn't even flinch. He picked up his phone and dialed the number again. "It's time," he growled. On the other end, a deep voice chuckled, already in motion. Back at the studio, Olivia knew something was off the moment she stepped into the green room. There was an eerie silence, the kind that sent a chill down her spine. Her assistant, Maya, looked up from her phone, eyes wide with concern. "You need to see this," Maya whispered, shrugging the phone toward Olivia. On the screen was a breaking news alert. "Scandal uncovered. New allegations surface against Olivia Carter." Her breath caught. She scrolled through the article. Lies, fabrications, accusations designed to destroy her credibility. This wasn't just an attack. This was war. Maya clenched her jaw. "It's Jonathan. He's behind this." Olivia exhaled slowly, her mind racing. She had two choices: crumble under the pressure, or fight back. She straightened her shoulders. "If he wants a war," she murmured, "he's going to get one." The live broadcast. That night, Olivia walked onto the set, her heart steady, her mind clear. "Good evening," she began, looking directly into the camera. "Tonight, I was supposed to sit here and let the lies destroy me. But I won't. Because the truth is more powerful than any fabricated story." The audience held their breath. The world watched. She pulled out her phone and held it up. "And here's the proof of who's really behind this." The screen displayed a leaked recording. Jonathan's voice, clear as day, plotting against her. The studio exploded in gasps. The internet went wild. Jonathan Reed had played his final move. And he had lost. Forever. The final moment. As Olivia left the studio that night, the air felt different. Lighter. The battle was over, and she had won, not with power, but with truth. She glanced at Maya and smiled. "Let's go. We have a future to build." And with that, she stepped into the night, victorious.